The Death Star. It was a moon-sized myth whispered about in fear long before it ever cast its first shadow across a planetary sky. The Death Star, the Galactic Empire's cold, gleaming monument to absolute power. Not just a station, not just a weapon, a prophecy fulfilled in steel, silence, and planetary fire. Officially known as DS-1 Orbital Battle Station, it was the culmination of decades of secret research, scientific cruelty, and imperial ambition. And in the cold, clinical language of military command, it was described simply as mobile, as if planets could walk, as if moons could blink. But the truth of its existence would send tremors across the galaxy forever. Measuring 120 kilometers in diameter and later 160 kilometers for its unfinished second version, the Death Star was a floating world in its own right. But instead of oceans or cities, its interior was filled with hangars, corridors, weapon systems, detention blocks, and of course, the heart of its terror, the super laser. The weapon that turned it from fortress to god, a kyber-powered beam so devastating it could fracture a planet's core and boil away life in seconds. And yet, this was not a tool forged in haste. The Death Star had taken years to realize, decades really, with roots stretching all the way back to the final days of the Republic. The concept first emerged under the shadowy orders of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, long before he crowned himself Emperor. Drawn up by the minds at CNR Systems, whispered among Geonosians, handed from Dooku to Krennic, it passed through many hands before it became real. The station's power source was a hypermatter reactor so dense and unstable, it rivaled the output of entire stars. At its core, reactors burned with the fury of main sequence stellar plasma, carefully bottled in containment fields so delicate that even a minor misalignment could unravel the whole structure. And yet, from this violent power came stillness. Cruisers obeyed, systems bent, because where the Death Star drifted, rebellion fell quiet. Its surface was segmented into two hemispheres, split by deep equatorial trenches and wrapped with docking bays, shield projectors, and tractor beams. It didn't just move through systems, it could simulate the gravitational pull of a planet. Even its interior was divided with eerie precision, 24 zones, 12 per hemisphere, each governed by command bridges and separated into categories. Command, technical, military, detention. Everything had a place, everyone had a function, but even terror needs housekeeping. Within its echoing halls were cantinas, gardens, training gyms, and residential quarters, all for the thousands of officers, gunners, stormtroopers, technicians, prisoners, and laborers who called the station home. These civilians, most never venturing far beyond their assigned sectors, lived in the shadow of the weapon, often unaware of the full scope of its purpose. Some were reassured by the illusion of order, others were simply too afraid to ask. And yet, for all its terror, the Death Star was not invincible. The engineers that built it, people like Galen Erso, were not all loyal. Some were exploited, others quietly rebelled in their own ways. Erso, under duress, introduced a critical flaw, an exhaust port that led directly to the main reactor. A small target, yes, but not impossible. And so, during the Battle of Yavin, a young pilot named Luke Skywalker, guided by the Force and the spirit of hope, fired a single proton torpedo into that vulnerable place. The station erupted. A fireball in the void, billions of credits, years of fear, and thousands of lives gone in one glorious burst of resistance. But fear dies slowly. The Empire built another, larger, stronger, and more terrifying. But even in its scale, the second Death Star could not escape its lineage. It was destroyed over Endor before it was even completed, undone not by firepower, but by the very thing it was designed to eliminate: rebellion. Irony coated its twisted steel. It fell, not from the sky, but from the arrogance of its creators. In the years that followed, the galaxy would speak of the Death Star in whispers, some in fear, others in awe. The legacy of the battle station would stretch into legend. It became a symbol, not just of empire, but of consequence, a reminder that no weapon, no matter how powerful, can ever escape the flaw that lives inside those who build it. And yet, The echo of the Death Star lived on, in dreams of destruction, in blueprints passed down, in successes like Starkiller Base and the Zistanc fleet. The Death Star didn't vanish, it simply multiplied, in idea, in warning, in myth, and in the quiet between stars, somewhere out there, perhaps a child still looks up and asks their parent, "Is that the moon?" And the parent, heart tightening, answers softly, "No, that's the Death Star." The Starforge. The Starforge was unlike any other superweapon in galactic history, not because of its ability to destroy, but because of its unparalleled power to create. Forged by the ancient and tyrannical Rakatan Infinite Empire nearly 30,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire, the Starforge was an immense automated shipyard that drew its energy directly from a nearby star in the Leon system. But this was no ordinary factory. Infused with the dark side of the Force, the Starforge became more than a technological marvel. It became a dark side nexus, a semi-sentient engine of war that fed on hatred, conquest, and fear to mass-produce fleets of warships, legions of droids, and armaments for galactic domination. The Rakatans, a species of Force-sensitive conquerors, enslaved entire worlds to construct it. Its ability to siphon both raw materials and solar energy, along with its connection to the Force, allowed it to generate war material at a pace unmatched in the galaxy's history. But the very traits that made the Starforge powerful also made it corruptive. Over time, the machine began to exert influence over its creators, driving them to madness, fueling their cruelty, and accelerating the fall of their empire. This self-perpetuating feedback loop of darkness and decay ultimately led to the downfall of the Rakatan civilization. After the Empire's collapse, the Starforge was lost, its existence buried in myth, its coordinates erased, its story thought forgotten. Thousands of years later, during the Jedi Civil War, it would resurface again, discovered by two fallen Jedi, Revan and Malak, on their quest to rebuild a Sith empire. The two Sith Lords rediscovered the ancient star maps scattered across the galaxy, which led them to the Leon system and the Starforge itself. Realizing its potential, they reactivated the machine and began using it to churn out ships and droids by the thousands, bolstering a Sith war machine that threatened to eclipse the Republic. Structurally, the Starforge resembled a colossal orb suspended between three massive solar collection arms that extended into the system's star, pulling solar matter into its core. The arms served not only as energy collectors, but also as docking bays for incoming and outgoing vessels. These three extensions housed the machine's main production facilities, and at its heart was a vast, cavernous core glowing with the radiance of stellar energy and dark side corruption. Unlike conventional shipyards, the Starforge required no crew. It was fully automated, driven by the twin engines of solar energy and force manipulation. However, it was not without defenses. The machine was protected by an army of automated battle droids and heavily fortified blast doors, and the nearby Temple of the Ancients projected an energy field capable of crashing enemy ships into the planet below. When Darth Malak took control of the Starforge after betraying Revan, he ran it at full capacity. His armada of Sith warships began overwhelming Republic defenses across the galaxy. What made the Starforge especially horrifying was not just its productivity, but its ability to sustain and repair itself. The machine had been left abandoned for millennia and yet required no maintenance. It mended its own systems, rebuilt the star maps, and reawakened itself as though it had merely been asleep. The corruption of the dark side within the machine also allowed it to perform terrifying acts. Malak used it to imprison and siphon the Force energy from near-dead Jedi, turning their suffering into a power source to heal his own body during combat. This horrific process left the victims in a limbo state between life and death, unable to pass on, unable to resist, used as nothing more than fuel. The Jedi Knight Bastila Shan played a critical role in the final battle against the Starforge, using her battle meditation to enhance the coordination of Republic forces as they launched the final assault on the facility. At the heart of the machine, the redeemed Revan confronted Malak, battled through droids and defenses, and finally defeated his former apprentice in a duel that echoed the rise and fall of empires. With Malak dead and the Republic victorious, the Star Forge was destroyed, collapsing in a thunderous explosion that shook the Lehon system and severed its grip on the galaxy. The Jedi and the Republic chose to suppress the truth of the Star Forge's existence, fearing that knowledge of it might inspire future tyrants to resurrect its designs. The Lehon system was quarantined, its hyperspace routes hidden, its ruins left to drift in darkness. And yet, the legacy of the Star Forge remains, a haunting reminder that the most dangerous weapons are not always those that destroy, but those that create, twist, and corrupt without restraint. It was not just a factory, it was a black hole of ambition, swallowing its users in their hunger for power. The Star Forge stood as the ultimate warning that even the most advanced technology, when married to the dark side, becomes a pathway not to progress, but to ruin. The Centerpoint Station. Buried in the forgotten reaches of galactic history, Centerpoint Station stands not merely as a relic of technology, but as a mythic monolith, older than the Republic, older than the Jedi Order, older even than the memory of most species that still wander the stars. It was built over 100,000 years before the events of the Galactic Civil War, a product of the Celestials, mysterious, godlike entities who shaped the very architecture of the galaxy. With dimensions dwarfing even the original Death Star, the station measured over 350 kilometers in length and 100 kilometers in width, floating silently between the twin worlds of Talus and Trailus in the Corellian system. At a glance, it appeared as a semi-transparent sphere with cylindrical extensions, but beneath that seemingly benign shape was a superweapon of inconceivable power. A hyperspace tractor beam strong enough to move planets, imprison black holes, and shatter celestial bodies. At the heart of Centerpoint Station was the Glow Point, a floating orb of energy housed within a 60-kilometer wide chamber, humming with ancient force and surrounded by Hollowtown, a settlement that grew obliviously around it, its inhabitants unaware they were living on the edge of annihilation. Once, the Celestials used the station to terraform solar systems and orchestrate star alignments, even using it to shape the Corellian system itself. They created the Maw, a black hole cluster that acted as a prison for their mother, the chaos entity Abeloth, and then vanished from known space, leaving Centerpoint dormant, its purpose and origin swallowed by time. In the absence of its creators, the station was slowly repurposed by settlers and later forgotten altogether. Its capabilities lay dormant for tens of thousands of years until scientists from Socoria unwittingly reactivated the tractor beam in 18 ABY, destroying an entire star and vaporizing Hollowtown in a burst of catastrophic energy. The true horror of the weapon was then realized, not just its raw power, but its unpredictability. During the Yuzhen Vong War, the station was used again, devastating fleets, both friend and foe, due to the difficulty of properly targeting its gravitational weapon. With such destructive potential, the Jedi Council and Galactic Alliance could no longer justify its existence. Under Grand Master Luke Skywalker's guidance, a mission was launched to destroy the station. Jedi Master Kip Duran managed to reprogram Centerpoint to fire on itself, effectively neutralizing the threat. But in a tragic twist, a technician seeking vengeance for his family sabotaged the mission, unknowingly triggering the reprogrammed pulse. The weapon turned inward, obliterating itself in a final blinding collapse that also destabilized the Maw cluster, freeing the imprisoned Abeloth and unleashing a cosmic threat the galaxy was never meant to face again. The destruction of Centerpoint Station was both a triumph and a curse, ending one of the most dangerous superweapons in galactic history, but reawakening a terror buried by the gods themselves. It remains a cautionary tale, not just of technological overreach, but of forgotten legacies left to slumber for good reason. A weapon that could reshape stars, move worlds, and shatter planets, and yet was remembered by most only as a myth until it wasn't. The World Devastator. Towering monstrosities of mechanical might, the World Devastators were the Empire's next terrifying step beyond the Death Star. Machines not just of destruction, but consumption and creation. These immense mobile foundries, deployed under the reborn Emperor Palpatine during the era of the Dark Empire, descended upon planetary surfaces and tore entire cities, landscapes, and infrastructures apart with massive tractor beam arrays. But unlike the Death Star, which obliterated a planet in an instant, the World Devastators devoured it slowly, methodically, turning the raw material into fuel for endless war. Their dark genius lay in their design. Tractor beams pulled metal, ore, and stone from the planet below, feeding it into internal molecular furnaces and assembly lines that forged new starfighters, droids, weapons, and armor. Each World Devastator was a mobile war factory, self-sufficient, ever-growing, and endlessly hungry. What made them even more insidious was their semi-autonomous artificial intelligence. At the core of each Devastator was a central droid brain, immensely powerful, cold, and calculating. These droid brains processed millions of variables in real time, allocating resources, designing upgrades, and modifying their own systems. No two Devastators were alike. Some evolved with heavier plating, others sprouted additional weaponry or defensive systems, and all had the potential to build more of themselves. With enough time and planetary resources, a single World Devastator could produce a fleet. Their external armor was nearly impervious to conventional weaponry, protected by advanced deflector shields and hull plating strong enough to withstand barrages from capital ships. Enemy starfighters that ventured too close were often captured by the same tractor beams used to rip cities apart, dragged into the gaping furnace maws of the Devastator and melted down in seconds. Their weapon systems were formidable as well. Heavy turbolaser batteries, ion cannons, missile launchers, and point defense systems ensured that even without escorts, they could lay siege to planetary defenses with impunity. But their most infamous deployment came during the Battle of Mon Calamari. After reclaiming Coruscant, the reborn Emperor turned his wrath toward Mon Cala, the oceanic jewel of the New Republic and temporary capital of the rebellion. World Devastators led the assault, descending into the atmosphere and raking the surface with their tractor beams, ripping apart Mon Cala's floating cities and underwater shipyards. Resistance forces fought valiantly, but found their weapons ineffective against the Devastator's impenetrable armor and adaptive AI. In the face of such power, the New Republic faced annihilation, until Luke Skywalker, believed to have joined Palpatine as his apprentice, played his trump card. Secretly working to sabotage the Empire from within, Luke used his position to manipulate command codes, rerouting them through R2-D2. The astromech droid uploaded a virus into the droid brain network, one that scrambled their core directives and turned the World Devastators against each other. The result was catastrophic for the Empire. The machines, confused and enraged, began targeting one another, tearing into each other's hulls, unleashing their fury in a brutal mechanical civil war. In moments, the tide of battle shifted and Mon Calamari was saved. After the war, the New Republic salvaged at least one Devastator, but the sheer horror of what the machines represented led to their destruction. The public demanded they be dismantled, their designs erased, and the technology buried. The concept of the World Devastator, an automated weapon of consumption, adaptation, and reproduction, was deemed too dangerous to ever resurface. And yet, somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, the blueprint for this mechanical nightmare likely still exists, waiting for the day when war becomes hunger and hunger becomes creation. The Galaxy Gun. The Galaxy Gun was a terrifying embodiment of the Empire's obsession with domination through technological dread, a superweapon unlike anything seen before or after its creation. Conceived and built under the direction of the resurrected Emperor Palpatine during the Dark Empire era, around 10 ABY, the Galaxy Gun was a monstrous space station shaped like a colossal cannon, measuring an astonishing 7,250 meters in length. Suspended in high orbit above the planet Biss, Palpatine's dark throne world and the heart of his Shadow Empire, it represented the ultimate escalation in long-range annihilation. Unlike the Death Star, which had to be maneuvered into proximity of a target, the Galaxy Gun could obliterate entire worlds from across the galaxy. Its mechanism was horrifyingly elegant. The weapon fired enormous sublight missiles equipped with advanced particle disintegrator warheads, also known as light-speed torpedoes, that could enter hyperspace and reach their targets within hours or even minutes. Once a missile exited hyperspace near its destination, it used advanced guidance systems to lock on, armed with built-in laser defenses and deflector shields to resist interception. If ships tried to stop them mid-flight, they would be cut down by the missile's self-protecting firepower. On impact, the warhead triggered a nucleonic chain reaction that converted planetary matter into pure energy, vaporizing continents and crumbling civilization in the blink of an eye. The scale of devastation was not limited to entire planets. If adjusted, the Galaxy Gun's payload could be fine-tuned for precision strikes on capital cities or high-value installations. Still, its main design was raw terror. One missile, one world, complete obliteration. The first demonstration of its might came shortly after Luke Skywalker escaped Palpatine's Dark Fortress. In retaliation, the Emperor ordered a strike on Pinnacle Moon, the location of the New Republic's Central Command. The missile exited hyperspace and struck without warning, leaving the once thriving outpost as nothing but scorched debris. The shockwaves reverberated across the galaxy, not only in space, but in the hearts of all those who dared to resist the Empire's rebirth. The Galaxy Gun's presence in orbit around Biss served not only as a strategic weapon, but also as a symbol of Imperial resurgence, guarded by a fleet of loyal Star Destroyers and sustained by a network of loyal engineers, technicians, and Sith-aligned officers. Hidden from the public eye, the weapon's location remained unknown to most, operating under a strict veil of secrecy. The missiles were stored internally and loaded into the firing tube by massive mechanical arms capable of launching volley after volley if needed. Each launch emitted a thunderous sonic shockwave across space, a horrifying signal to anyone watching that a planet had just been marked for erasure. Unlike the Death Star, which required years of construction and vast planetary resources, the Galaxy Gun was relatively efficient to build and operate, relying less on planetary movement and more on devastating long-range capability. Its greatest strength was its independence. It didn't need to be in orbit around a target. It could stay safe in Imperial-controlled space and wipe enemies off the map light years away. However, its weakness lay in its size and mobility. The station was not maneuverable enough to escape an assault, and although it was equipped with a hyperdrive, albeit a slow Class 6, it wasn't designed to flee. It was built for intimidation, not agility. The end of the Galaxy Gun came swiftly and poetically. During the climactic battle over the planet Onderon in 11 ABY, Luke Skywalker and his allies launched a desperate counterattack. R2-D2, the ever-faithful astromech droid, had hijacked the Eclipse II, Palpatine's new flagship, a titanic star dreadnought armed with its own super laser. With precise programming and fearless resolve, R2-D2 set the ship on a collision course directly into the Galaxy Gun. The cannon, too large and slow to evade, had no chance of escaping impact. The explosion was massive, a blinding flash in the void of space that vaporized both the Eclipse II and the Galaxy Gun in a matter of seconds. But even in death, the weapon dealt one final blow. Just before the collision, a final missile had been launched, but without proper navigation, the missile veered off course and was pulled back by the gravity well of Biss. Upon re-entry, it detonated on the planet's surface, annihilating the Emperor's stronghold, his cloning vats, and his gathered forces. It was as if the Galaxy Gun's final breath had taken its own creator with it. The explosion tore apart Biss and ended Operation Shadowhand, the Emperor's final campaign of galactic terror. In the annals of Star Wars history, the Galaxy Gun is often overshadowed by the flashier, more iconic Death Star. But in truth, it was far more dangerous in practice. Its ability to strike from vast distances made it nearly impossible to defend against. No elaborate battle station needing orbital approach, no trench run needed to find a thermal exhaust port, just a missile, a target, and annihilation. The psychological impact of its attacks plunged entire star systems into fear and paralysis. Planets began contemplating surrender without a fight, not knowing if they'd be the next to vanish in a flash of light. It wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a tool of galactic submission. If not for the courage of a small rebellion, a brave astromech, and a rogue eclipse, the Empire could have launched an era of long-range planetary destruction that would have made the galaxy unrecognizable. The Galaxy Gun, despite its short-lived reign, remains a symbol of what unchecked power and technological obsession can birth: fear wrapped in metal, death delivered through hyperspace, and silence left in its wake. The Malachor. Malachor was a name whispered with dread across the galaxy, a world etched into the deepest scars of both Jedi and Sith history. Beneath its cracked and jagged surface lay a petrified battlefield, frozen in time from a calamity so great it turned warriors to stone. At the heart of this desolate planet stood the Sith Temple, an ancient monument to dark ambition and a superweapon powered by a massive kyber crystal. Thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin, a Sith Lord known as Darth Nihilus constructed the temple with the sole intention of creating a planet-killing weapon that drew directly from the crystal's raw power. The Sith believed Malachor's buried potential could shift the balance of the galaxy, but when the Jedi discovered the growing threat, they launched a full-scale assault to end the Sith presence there. The confrontation escalated into the Great Scourge of Malachor. In the heat of the battle, the weapon was activated, either as a last desperate act or a triumphant strike. Its effect was instant and horrifying. The pulse of energy surged outward in every direction, vaporizing some and petrifying the rest where they stood. Jedi and Sith alike were locked in death, their forms immortalized in mid-strike across the broken plains. The aftermath left a haunting legacy, a world where time stopped and where a single activation of dark energy had silenced a generation of warriors. The weapon itself became dormant, the kyber crystal still pulsing faintly beneath the temple's spire, a reminder of power that once ignited the sky. Thousands of years passed, and the temple became legend, its location lost to myth. It wasn't until the desperate years of the Galactic Civil War that the temple was rediscovered. Darth Maul, surviving and wandering, found his way to Malachor alongside young Jedi in training Ezra Bridger. Together, they unearthed the secrets hidden within the temple's labyrinthine structure, where the weapon still lay intact and slumbering. Guided by ancient Sith holocrons and twisted ambition, they sought to activate the temple again. When Maul convinced Ezra to retrieve the holocron and place it within the obelisk atop the temple, the system reawakened, its energy beginning to rise once more. But before the weapon could be fully armed, the holocron was removed prematurely, triggering a volatile cascade that destabilized the entire complex. The resulting chaos drew the attention of Darth Vader himself, who arrived to stop the activation and confront his former apprentice Ahsoka Tano in a climactic duel. As Vader and Ahsoka clashed in the shadows of the kyber-powered altar, the temple's foundations began to collapse under the strain of the energy surge. Stone cracked, debris rained down, and the very earth shuddered under the weight of a power that was never meant to be disturbed. The final moments of the duel were lost in the collapsing ruins, leaving only questions and whispers of what truly happened between master and apprentice. When the dust settled, the temple was buried once more, its weapon rendered useless, its secrets again sealed beneath the crust of a haunted world. Malachor remained a place of silence and ruin, a monument to the horrors of unchecked power, and a tomb for those who dared to wield it. Its legacy was not just one of destruction, but of warning, etched into stone and scar, that the Force, when harnessed through darkness, could end not only battles, but worlds. The Darth Nihilus. Darth Nihilus was unlike any other superweapon in the galaxy, not a station or a device, but a man twisted into something far beyond human, a wound in the Force so severe that he became a living vortex of destruction. Born from the devastation of Malachor 5 and the catastrophic activation of the mass shadow generator, Nihilus emerged as one of the only survivors, but he did not survive unchanged. The death, the anguish, the raw violence of countless lives extinguished in an instant left a scar so deep that it severed him from his former self. What remained was hunger, an all-consuming void that could only be filled by devouring the life energy of others. Nihilus's very presence warped the Force. His body eroded until he could no longer exist without a mask and armor to hold his spirit together. He ceased speaking a language others could understand, communicating only through the Force, in waves of pain, desire, and need. Trained by Darth Trier at the Traus Academy, Nihilus grew powerful enough to join the Sith Triumvirate as the Lord of Hunger, a being who did not conquer planets in the traditional sense, but who simply drained them of life. His most horrifying demonstration came at the planet of Qatar, a world where Jedi had gathered to meditate and hide. Nihilus sensed their presence across the stars, and from the bridge of his ship, the Ravager, he fed. In a single moment, he consumed the entire planet. Every Jedi, every creature, every whisper of life gone without a trace. The planet left a sterile shell. Not a single blaster was fired. He simply existed, and they died. His hunger only grew. He turned his attention to Telos 4, hoping to feast once again, but there he met Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, another wound in the Force, one created when she too activated the mass shadow generator. Unlike others, she could resist Nihilus's drain, her very presence nullifying his greatest weapon. In a climactic duel aboard the Ravager, Mitra faced the Sith Lord, and though his power was immense, his reliance on hunger became his undoing. Her resistance to the drain left him vulnerable, and she struck him down, his body collapsing, his spirit dissolving into the Force. His mask remained behind, a symbol of what he had become. It was later recovered and interred on Korriban, still echoing with dark whispers. Through a holocron, one could still feel the pain and emptiness he embodied. Darth Nihilus was not merely a Sith. He was what happens when power is pursued at the cost of the soul. He was hunger incarnate, and for a time, he was the galaxy's most terrifying superweapon, silent, unseen, and utterly unstoppable. The Starkiller. Starkiller Base was the First Order's most ambitious and terrifying project, an entire planet converted into a mobile superweapon, capable not just of destroying planets, but obliterating entire star systems in a single blinding blast. Built into the ancient Jedi world of Ilum, once a sacred place where young Jedi collected kyber crystals for their lightsabers, the base marked a cruel irony. A place once devoted to peace, transformed into the galaxy's greatest engine of annihilation. The First Order strip-mined Ilum's vast kyber resources, hollowed out its core, and embedded the planet with systems of magnetic containment, energy conduits, and dark energy harvesters. The base's central weapon worked by drawing power directly from stars, draining them until they collapsed. This stellar energy was then compressed in the planet's core, focused through massive containment rings, and expelled through a planetary-scale firing trench. What made Starkiller uniquely terrifying was its ability to release its energy through hyperspace. The weapon's beam didn't travel across space in the conventional sense. It tunneled through hyperspace, bypassing all planetary defenses and emerging simultaneously across multiple locations. When the weapon was fired on the Hosnian system, the capital of the New Republic, entire worlds were incinerated in seconds. The beam struck with such force that it destabilized the planetary cores, ripping them apart and casting shockwaves across the galaxy. But Starkiller Base was more than a weapon. It was a fortress. The First Order embedded massive hangars, command centers, weapons factories, stormtrooper garrisons, and starship docks deep into its icy crust. Snowtroopers patrolled the frigid terrain, while defense systems hidden in the glaciers ensured that the base could repel orbital and surface attacks. Beneath the surface lay the thermal oscillator, a vital component of the weapon that regulated its energy intake and dispersal. The entire operation was controlled by a centralized command, led by General Hux and overseen by Supreme Leader Snoke. Yet despite its overwhelming power, Starkiller had a fatal flaw. The thermal oscillator, while regulating the vast stellar energy coursing through the planet, was vulnerable to sabotage. When the Resistance learned of the base's location and weakness, they devised a desperate plan. Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Finn infiltrated the base, planting charges in the oscillator, while Poe Dameron led a starfighter assault from the air. In a final run, reminiscent of the Death Star trench runs decades earlier, Poe flew through the collapsing oscillator trench and delivered the final blow, igniting a chain reaction that destabilized the planet. As the energy contained in the core burst free, the surface fractured, and Starkiller Base imploded in a spectacular cascade of fire and gravity. The very star it had drained exploded in reverse, consuming the weapon in light. Starkiller's legacy, though brief, was unforgettable. It was the embodiment of unchecked power, a world that devoured other worlds, and a chilling reminder that the darkness of the past had not only survived, but evolved. It showed that even in a galaxy scarred by wars and rebellions, the threat of destruction could still rise again, not as a lesson unlearned, but as history rewritten in fire and ruin. The Zistanc-class Star Destroyer. The Zistanc-class Star Destroyer was the terrifying centerpiece of the Sith Eternal's Final Order fleet, an armada born in secret on the dark, storm-racked world of Exegol. While at first glance it resembled the iconic Imperial Star Destroyers of the Galactic Empire, the Zistanc class held a grim and deadly upgrade that placed it among the most dangerous superweapons ever constructed. A planet-destroying axial superlaser mounted beneath its massive hull. Each ship in the fleet bore this dreadful weapon, giving even a single vessel the destructive capability once reserved for the Death Star itself. Powered by experimental Kyber crystal reactors and outfitted with enhancements derived from ancient Sith technology and Palpatine's long-concealed research, the Zistanc class represented the culmination of decades of dark side engineering. These superlasers channeled unimaginable energy from deep within the ship's reactor core, focusing it through the axial cannon into a beam capable of instantly reducing entire worlds to dust. Despite its immense power, the system carried significant risks. If the beam were disrupted or overloaded, it could lead to catastrophic reactor failure, destroying the ship itself. This vulnerability, hidden beneath layers of reinforced armor, was one of the few chinks in its otherwise impervious design. But within the chaos of Exegol's atmospheric interference, locating and exploiting such a flaw was no easy task. The Sith Eternal's fleet relied on a single navigation tower to coordinate hyperspace exits and orbital control due to the unstable and violent conditions on Exegol, where static discharges and electromagnetic storms rendered normal starship instruments nearly useless. Without this tower, the fleet was effectively trapped. It was this weakness that became the Achilles heel of the Zistanc fleet. During the Battle of Exegol, the Resistance, aided by a last-minute uprising of citizens and smugglers from across the galaxy, launched a desperate assault. Knowing the navigation tower was the key, they redirected the targeting data to General Pryde's command ship, the Steadfast. When the ship was destroyed, the entire fleet was left disoriented and vulnerable. One by one, the Zistanc-class Star Destroyers were targeted and taken down, their immense power rendered useless by their dependency on centralized guidance. While the ships were individually equipped with their own hyperdrives and navigational systems, the ambient interference of Exegol's upper atmosphere made those systems unreliable without external calibration. In the end, the Sith fleet crumbled, undone by a single strategic flaw despite its vast technological superiority. Yet the Zistanc-class Star Destroyer remains a symbol of unrestrained ambition, a terrifying example of what happens when destructive power is multiplied, mass-produced, and wielded by fanatics bent on total domination. It was not just a superweapon, but a fleet of superweapons, each one a floating apocalypse, proof that the legacy of the Empire had not been buried, but instead reborn in shadow. Its defeat marked the final fall of Palpatine's dreams of eternal rule, and yet the memory of its firepower lingers, a dark echo in the Force and in the galaxy's history of warfare. The Suncrusher. The Suncrusher was a weapon of mythic proportions, small enough to fit in a hangar, yet powerful enough to annihilate entire star systems by causing their suns to go supernova. Created in the secretive Maw installation under the command of Grand Moff Tarkin, the Suncrusher was developed by Imperial scientists as a counter to the Rebel Alliance after the destruction of the second Death Star. But unlike other superweapons which relied on brute force or planet-based targeting, the Suncrusher was more insidious, using advanced quantum crystalline armor and resonance torpedoes to initiate chain reactions within a star's core. The weapon was no larger than a starfighter, yet its armor made it nearly indestructible, even capable of withstanding turbo-laser blasts, collisions with capital ships, and the gravitational pull of a black hole. Its sleek, dagger-like design was deceptively unassuming, hiding within it a payload that could doom entire civilizations. It housed a launcher for specialized resonance torpedoes, each tuned to disrupt stellar fusion at a molecular level. When fired into a star, the torpedoes would create an uncontrolled fusion cascade, forcing the star to explode in a supernova, destroying not just a single planet, but everything within that system's orbit. What made the Suncrusher especially dangerous was not just its power, but its elusiveness. Its small size and impenetrable armor made it impossible to detect or destroy using traditional methods. Even the mightiest ships of the New Republic or remnants of the Imperial fleet were powerless to stop it if it entered their system. The craft was initially stolen by Kip Duran, a Force-sensitive youth trained by Luke Skywalker who fell under the influence of the Sith spirit Exar Kun. Under Exar Kun's manipulation, Kip used the Suncrusher to destroy the Carida system, one of the Empire's primary military training worlds. This act served as a horrifying demonstration of the weapon's power and the corrupting influence of unchecked vengeance. The Suncrusher's destructive capability rivaled even that of the Death Star, but in a way that was far more terrifying. Stealthy, untraceable, and cosmic in scale. While the Death Star had to be positioned within firing range and could be targeted in return, the Suncrusher could destroy without ever being seen. Its armor, made from quantum crystalline materials, was so dense and durable that not even the combined firepower of an entire fleet could penetrate it. In battle, it would glide silently past enemy lines, immune to everything, and release a single torpedo that would seal the fate of a star system. After Duran was brought back from the brink by Luke and Leia, the New Republic debated whether to dismantle or destroy the Suncrusher, but they found it virtually indestructible. It was eventually fired into a black hole in the Maw cluster, where it disappeared, though not before surviving the initial descent, a final testament to the insane durability and haunting legacy of this superweapon. The Suncrusher stood as a reminder that true terror does not always come from massive space stations or fleets of destroyers, but from small, undetectable weapons that render entire civilizations powerless before the light of a dying sun. It remains one of the most feared and controversial weapons in all of galactic history, not just because of its physical power, but because it questioned the very morality of warfare and the cost of justice in an age where vengeance could be cloaked in righteousness. The Suncrusher, in its silent descent into oblivion, took with it not only the screams of the Carida system, but a shadow that continues to haunt the conscience of every civilization that dares dream of peace through overwhelming firepower. The Dark Reaper. The Dark Reaper was a Sith superweapon conceived in the ancient shadows of the Great Hyperspace War, roughly 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Unlike the mechanical might of the Death Star or the gravitational terror of the mass shadow generator, the Dark Reaper sought to weaponize the Force itself. At its heart was the infamous Force Harvester, a cursed mechanism capable of draining the life essence and Force energy from all living beings within range, reducing entire battlefields to desolate husks. This harvested power was then channeled into a destructive energy core, producing beams so devastating they could level cities and destroy legions in mere moments. The Reaper's outer frame resembled a monstrous fusion of temple and tank, towering, mobile, and cloaked in arcane Sith symbols that pulsed with dark side energy. Though equipped with standard defenses such as turbo lasers and reinforced armor, its true threat came not from its weaponry, but from its ability to exterminate all life through sheer force consumption. Its most infamous use came during the Great Sith War, when the fallen Jedi Exar Kun unearthed the Dark Reaper's components in a forgotten temple on Yavin 4. His dark crusade against the Republic saw the Reaper unleashed once again, leaving trails of scorched life and vanquished armies. But like many Sith inventions, the weapon's ambition outpaced its security. Ulic Qel-Droma, once an ally of Kun, betrayed his former master and revealed that the Dark Reaper had a weakness. It could not drain a wound in the Force. Armed with this knowledge, the Jedi launched a desperate offensive. A strike team assaulted the Reaper's operational core, leveraging their resilience to the Force Harvester's effects to dismantle the weapon. The core was shattered, the Harvester disabled, and the Reaper itself was entombed in the forgotten sands of history. But darkness never stays buried. Thousands of years later, during the Clone Wars, Count Dooku discovered pieces of the Force Harvester hidden within Separatist-controlled systems. Seeking to reignite ancient power, Dooku activated a prototype version, threatening to repeat the terror of the Dark Reaper. Sensing the danger, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker led a solo mission deep into Separatist space. With raw courage and a furious sense of justice, he battled through waves of battle droids and mechanized defenses, confronting the prototype and destroying it in a burst of light and fire. The Reaper's legacy was once again extinguished, but legends whisper that not all parts were accounted for, that somewhere the scattered components of the Reaper and its Harvester lie waiting. And should another ambitious warlord ever gather them again, the galaxy may once more face a terror not of metal or flame, but of the Force itself, turned into a weapon against all who live and breathe. The Dark Saber. The Dark Saber stands as one of the most enigmatic and revered weapons in all of Star Wars history. A unique black-bladed lightsaber that is not only a tool of combat, but a symbol of leadership and legacy among the Mandalorians. Forged over 1,000 years before the rise of the Empire by Tara Vizsla, the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order, the Darksaber's very creation was a defiance of tradition and a fusion of cultures, often in conflict. Unlike standard lightsabers that emit glowing blades of various hues, the Darksaber projects a flat, almost sword-like blade of deep, crackling black energy, surrounded by a faint white outline and resonating with an eerie hum unlike any other saber. The weapon is shorter than most lightsabers and shaped more like a traditional saber, with an angular, almost archaic design that makes it instantly recognizable. Its black kyber crystal is attuned to the willpower of its wielder, growing heavier and more resistant if not claimed through victory in combat, a tradition that has birthed countless battles over the centuries. After Tara Vizsla's death, the Darksaber was kept in the Jedi Temple, but it was eventually stolen by House Vizsla during the fall of the Old Republic. Passed down through generations, the blade became a Mandalorian cultural artifact and a mark of the rightful ruler of Mandalore. Whoever wielded it was seen as having the strength to unite the clans and lead the planet into a new era. During the Clone Wars, the blade fell into the hands of Pre Vizsla, leader of the militant group Death Watch, who used it to challenge both Jedi and political leaders alike. But it was Darth Maul who famously seized the Darksaber after killing Pre Vizsla in single combat, thus claiming both the weapon and control of Mandalore itself. Maul's tenure as ruler was short-lived, but the Darksaber's mystique only grew. Years later, Sabine Wren of Clan Wren recovered the Darksaber from Maul's lair on Dathomir and trained with it under Jedi guidance, eventually using it to help unite the Mandalorian clans against Imperial rule. She offered the weapon to Bo-Katan Kryze, believing her the rightful leader, but that transfer, done without combat, would later cause tension and controversy. In the time of the New Republic, the Darksaber resurfaced again in the possession of Moff Gideon, a former Imperial officer who claimed it as a trophy and symbol of power. Din Djarin, the Mandalorian bounty hunter known as the Mandalorian, defeated Gideon in battle and unwittingly claimed the dark saber, becoming its next rightful wielder despite having no desire to rule. His ownership sparked further turmoil as Bo-Katan, seeking to reclaim her leadership, was initially unable to accept the blade due to the traditional Mandalorian requirement that it be earned through combat. Eventually, after a battle in which Djarin was disarmed and Bo-Katan defeated the enemy, she was able to reclaim the weapon according to tradition, but even that moment was short-lived, as the blade was later destroyed by Moff Gideon during the climactic battle on Mandalore, symbolizing both the end of its long legacy and the beginning of a new era for the Mandalorian people. The dark saber represents more than combat. It embodies identity, ideology, and the struggle for unity within a fractured people. It is the only saber known to have its own gravitational pull in the Force, a weapon that resists the unworthy and responds with raw power to those with strong will and clarity of purpose. Though the physical blade may now be gone, the mythos of the Darksaber endures, etched into history not just as a weapon but as a legend. The Hammer Station. Hammer Station was a brutal testament to desperation, an improvised weapon of war forged in fear during the darkest days of the Great Galactic War. Constructed by the Republic within the gutted remains of an asteroid, Hammer Station was no mere battle platform. It was a planetary siege engine designed to obliterate entire cities with a single strike using a horrifying method: weaponized asteroids. The Republic engineers embedded an enormous tractor beam system within the asteroid's core, one capable of seizing nearby debris, locking it into magnetic arrays, and then launching it at targets with kinetic acceleration so devastating that no planetary shield could withstand the impact. It was not subtle, it was primal force, a throwback to hurling stones across a battlefield, but now on a galactic scale. Hammer Station was also outfitted with a gravity cannon, a crude but terrifying amplification system that allowed it to rip natural satellites or artificial space stations from orbit and hurl them toward planetary surfaces. Its function was indiscriminate, and even those who designed it feared its use. As such, the Republic mothballed the project before it could be fully tested, hiding it away in the Outer Rim's dead zones. But as with all dormant weapons, its silence was temporary. Years after the sacking of Coruscant, the Advoz hegemony, a war-hungry faction with no allegiance to the Republic or Sith Empire, uncovered Hammer Station and reactivated it. They found not only the superweapon intact, but also a cache of abandoned Republic war droids still functional within its hull. Seizing both the station and its automated defenders, the Advoz launched a reign of terror across the Outer Rim, firing asteroid after asteroid at enemy holdings and defiant colonies. Entire cities were reduced to dust, orbital fleets shattered by rocks hurled with the fury of ancient gods. As reports of Hammer Station's reawakening reached the galaxy's core, both the Republic and Sith Empire realized the threat it posed extended far beyond local skirmishes. It was a destabilizing force in a fragile post-war era. Strike teams from both factions raced to eliminate it, converging on the station in a violent and chaotic battle within the asteroid's hollowed interior. Amid firestorms and collapsing corridors, the station's main reactor was breached. The resulting explosion ripped Hammer Station apart from the inside, scattering its remains across the dead vacuum of space. Yet even in its destruction, the memory of Hammer Station lingered like the echo of a monstrous war cry, a crude but effective symbol of how quickly desperation could birth annihilation, and how the most ancient methods of violence could still shake the stars when amplified by the hands of modern warlords.